The first royal voice broke before Tessa Lorn opened her mouth. That was impossible. Everyone in the Hall of War Choir knew the no-howl girl had no song to steal, no note to ruin, no wolf inside her throat strong enough to answer even a common pack call. She stood barefoot on the black marble below the victory dais, her wrists bound with silver voice cord, her plain gray dress wet at the hem from the snow outside. Above her, 100 royal singers waited in a crescent of gold masks and white wolf fur cloaks, their throats painted with blue war ash. They had been chosen from noble bloodlines. She had been dragged from the scullery. That was why the court laughed when High Choirmaster Orsian Vale lifted his ivory baton and pointed it at her. Let the kingdom see what silence owes victory. His mouth curved without warmth. If she has no howl, let the hall take what little voice remains. The nobles raised their cups. The feast tables glittered with black bread, red wine, and roasted winter stag. Banners of House Blackharp hung from the rafters, still stained with smoke from the northern campaign. Tonight was meant to crown triumph. The royal wolves had returned from war. The border packs had bowed. The war choir would sing the old victory howl, and every loyal throat in the hall would answer. Only Tessa Lorn had been brought to fail. She had been born under a full battle moon, and had never howled. Not at first shift age. Not when the other girls found their wolf song in the pine snow. Her throat had always closed around, sound like a fist. She could speak softly if no one frightened her. She could whisper names of herbs, count kitchen stores, soothe wounded hounds beneath the butcher stairs. But howl never. So they called her Hollow Throat. A girl-shaped absence. A bad omen wrapped in skin. Alpha King Maeron Blackharp sat upon the black iron victory throne, one hand resting on the wolf head arm. He did not drink. He did not smile. War had made him harder than the statues behind him, broad-shouldered in dark armor with black hair tied at his nape, and cold silver eyes fixed on the choir. His wolf shadow lay behind the throne. That was the first thing Tessa noticed. A king's war wolf should stand during the victory song. It should tower over the hall, teeth-bared mane burning with moon-silver command. Maeron's wolf lay with its head low, one ear torn its shadowy ribs, rising too slowly. No one else looked at it, or no one dared. Lady Sarathy Morn stood beside the throne in a white victory gown, her gold voice chain resting elegantly at her throat. She was meant to lead the Queen's answering note after the choir began. The court loved her voice. They said it could calm wounded soldiers and make enemy wolves kneel. Tessa had heard it once through a kitchen wall. Beautiful. Empty. Orsian's baton lowered toward Tessa's bound wrists. This girl was found in the East Gallery, after the war horn sounded. She carried no pack echo, no victory response, no throat flame. Such silence insults the dead. Tessa lifted her head. I was carrying water to the wounded. A noblewoman laughed into her cup. Orsian's eyes cooled. No-howl girls do not answer in the war choir hall. The silver voice cord tightened around Tessa's wrists. Pain shot up her arms and into her throat. She swallowed it. That was what silence had taught. Her pain did not need a witness to be real. Maeron's gaze shifted. Not to her face first, to the cord. Why bind her voice through her hands? He asked. The hall quieted. Orsian bowed smooth as a blade sliding into a sleeve. Voice cord prevents false resonance, Majesty. Hollow throats sometimes echo stronger songs near them. She has no howl, Maeron said. Exactly why she must be restrained. Tessa felt the answer land wrong. So did the king. His fingers tightened once on the throne arm. Behind him, the wounded wolf shadow opened one silver eye. Sarathy smiled gently. My king, the right is harmless, if she is truly empty. Let the choir prove the kingdom whole. Tessa heard the kindness in her voice, and the threat beneath it. Maeron leaned back. Begin. Orsian raised his baton. The royal singers inhaled together. The sound should have shaken the rafters. Instead, the first note cracked. A masked tenor near the left side clutched his throat. His gold mask split down the mouth. Another singer tried to carry the line, but his voice snapped into a harsh rasp. Then another, and another. The victory song staggered through the choir like a wounded animal. The court fell silent. Orsian's baton trembled. Only a little. Lady Sarathy's hand moved to her gold voice chain. Tessa felt something warm beneath the hollow of her throat. Not a sound. A memory of one. The royal singers tried again. This time every voice broke at once. Gold masks shattered. Blue ash burned black at their throats. 100 noble singers collapsed to their knees, choking on the victory howl they had claimed as pure. Tessa stood alone in the center of the hall, silent, untouched. Then, the living war choir woke. The walls opened their stone mouths. Hundreds of carved wolf faces along the columns, split from muzzle to throat, and old moonlight poured from them in pale streams. Their sound did not fill the hall. It bent toward Tessa. The silver voice cord around her wrists began to smoke. Orsian's face went white. "Close her throat," he said. Too late. Tessa inhaled. No howl came from her mouth. The glow rose from beneath her throat. Silver, blue, and ancient lighting, the skin where no mark had ever been allowed to show. Alpha King Maeron Blackharp stood so sharply, the throne struck the wall behind him. His wounded wolf shadow rose. Slowly, then bowed its great head toward Tessa's silent throat. The Hall of War choir answered in one voice. Not empty. Sealed. Gold masks struck the marble like fallen teeth. The royal singers knelt in the crescent above Tessa Lorn, clutching their throats, their white wolf fur cloaks, soaked with spilled wine and blue-black ash. Some tried to speak. Only broken air came out. Others stared at her with terror sharp enough to cut through the victory feast. Tessa did not move. She was afraid that if she moved, the glow beneath her throat would become a sound. The living war choir watched from the walls, hundreds of carved wolf mouths open in the black stone. Pale moonlight poured from their throats in silent streams, all bending toward her, as if her silence were the only note left in the hall. High Choirmaster Orsian Vale recovered first. He always did. False resonance, he said, voice too loud. She has pulled the royal voices into her hollow throat. Tessa shook her head once. No one listened. Orsian pointed his ivory baton at the smoking voice cord around her wrists. Bind her tighter. If the stolen note rises, it will fracture the victory rite. 2 choir guards moved toward her. Alpha King Maeron Blackharp's voice cut through the hall. No one touches the cord. The guards stopped. Orsian turned, bowing with visible effort. Majesty, if she is allowed to hold the note— She is not holding anything, Maeron said. Everyone else is losing it. A murmur passed through the nobles. Tessa looked toward the throne despite herself. Maeron stood before it. Now, black armor catching the pale warlight. His wounded wolf shadow risen behind him with its head still lowered toward her. Not kneeling. Not worshipping. Listening. That frightened the court more than the broken choir. Lady Sarathy Morn stepped forward, graceful as snowfall. Her gold voice chain glimmered at her throat, each small link carved like a wolf's open mouth. "My king," she said softly, "the hall has been disturbed. Let me restore the queen's answering note before panic dishonors the dead." Orsian's eyes flicked to her. A warning. Too quick. The war choir saw it. The carved wolf mouths along the columns opened wider. Sarathy touched the chain at her throat and sang. The sound was beautiful enough to make the hall remember why it had loved her. Clear, golden, calm. The collapsed singers lifted their heads. Nobles breathed again. Even Tessa felt the note reach toward the pain in her throat, like a warm hand. Then the note bent. Not toward the war choir. Toward the silver cord binding Tessa's wrists. The gold chain at Sarathy's throat tightened. Her eyes widened. For one heartbeat the court saw strain under beauty, hunger under grace. The royal singers tried to answer her. Their voices broke again. This time the broken sound formed words in the stone mouths. Stolen note. Tessa's knees weakened. Orsien raised his baton sharply. Silence the walls. No one moved. Maeron did. He stepped down from the dais, each black-armored stride echoing through the ruined song. Nobles shifted away from him. Sarathi lowered her hand from her throat, but the gold chain kept pulsing. Maeron stopped before Tessa close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his eyes. "Can you speak?" Tessa swallowed. Pain burned under her skin, but her voice came thin and rough. "Yes. Can you howl?" The old shame rose by habit. "No." The war choir answered at once. "Not no." The word rolled through the carved wolves, deep and ancient. Tessa flinched. Maeron's gaze sharpened. "What does that mean?" Orsien moved too quickly. "It means the hall is corrupted." She has twisted refusal into witness. Tessa looked past Maeron to the walls. The moonlight pouring from the wolf mouths changed shape. A memory formed in the air above the feast tables. A child on a cold stone bench, small hands clenched in her lap, throat bare and glowing faint silver blue. Younger Orsien stood before her with a needle of white bone. Beside him, a noblewoman held a gold voice chain no larger than a child's collar. Tessa stopped breathing. She knew that child. Not from memory, from pain. The vision showed Orsien pressing the bone needle beneath the child's throat. Silver blue light spilled from the wound. The noblewoman lifted the little gold chain, and the light threaded into it like a living note. Sarathi's face went pale. Maeron turned toward her chain. It was glowing with the same silver-blue light. The war choir spoke again. Her howl was not missing. The child in the vision opened her mouth to scream. No sound came. Orsien whispered over her seal the first note before it commands the werewolves. The vision shattered. Tessa stood in the center of the hall, one hand rising to her throat. The glow beneath her skin pulsed once. All around the feast hall, every werewolf banner bowed inward. Maeron's wolf shadow lifted its head, eyes fixed on her, no longer wounded in silence, but waiting for a command it had been denied for years. Sarathi's gold voice chain cracked. And from inside the broken link, Tessa heard her stolen childhood howl trying to come home. The cracked link did not fall from Sarathi's throat. It opened. A thin silver-blue note slipped out of the broken gold and crossed the hall like a frightened animal searching for its body. The royal singers recoiled from it. The nobles stepped back from the feast tables. Even the torches along the black walls bent their flames away. Tessa Lorn could not breathe. The note came toward her. Not fast, not violent. It trembled as if it had been wounded a long time and no longer trusted return. Her throat burned in answer. High Choirmaster Orsien Vale moved before it could reach her. He struck his ivory baton against the marble and the sound snapped across the hall like bone breaking. "Hold the chain," he ordered. Sarathi's hands flew to the gold voice chain at her throat. "Orsien, hold it, my lady, unless you want the court to hear what was never meant to leave you." That silenced her. The note stopped inches from Tessa's lips. Alpha King Maeron Blackharp turned slowly toward them both. His wolf shadow stood behind him. Now, torn ear, lifted silver eyes fixed on the hovering note. "What was never meant to leave her?" Maeron asked. Orsien bowed, but sweat shone along his temple. Majesty, a war choir, stores borrowed notes during royal rites. Lady Sarathi carries the queen's answer by lawful appointment. The living war choir answered from the walls. Borrowed. The single word shook dust from the rafters. Then the carved wolf mouths opened wider, and another memory spilled across the feast tables. Tessa saw the same child again, small and pale on the stone bench. The white bone needle pierced her throat. Orsien drew out the first sound before it could become a cry. But this time, the vision did not end there. It followed the silver-blue thread into a gold chain, then into the war choir hall on a winter night. Years later, Sarathi stood younger, beautiful and terrified before the royal singers. Her voice shook as she tried to sing. Nothing answered. Orsien clasped the gold chain around her neck. Do not fear. The no-howl child will never need what she cannot use. Sarathi touched the chain. Then she sang with Tessa's stolen note. Every royal wolf in the hall knelt. The vision shattered. A harsh whisper moved through the court. Sarathi's face had lost all color. Tessa stared at her. The pain in her throat had changed. It was no longer only shame. It was grief with teeth. You knew, Tessa said. Sarathi's eyes filled, but her chin lifted. I was chosen to keep the kingdom steady. My voice was taken because yours failed. My voice was needed, Sarathi said, and the softness in her broke at last. You were a kitchen girl with a dangerous throat. I was trained for court, for command, for the king's side. Maeron's expression turned cold. Not loud. Cold. My side was bought with her wound. Saratha looked at him, and for the first time her beauty became desperate. Your wolf obeyed the victory song because I kept the note pure. Without it, the war packs would never have held the northern line, the war choir answered. Stolen victory. The words struck the hall harder than a shout. Tessa swayed. The silver-blue note still hovered before her mouth, waiting. If she opened her lips, would it return? Would it tear her apart? Would the whole kingdom hear the thing Orsien feared? Orsien saw the question on her face, and raised the baton again. Close her throat. 2 masked guards lunged. Maeron moved first. He did not draw his sword. He caught one guard by the collar and threw him against the dais steps. His wolf shadow crossed the other's path, and the man dropped flat before the beast touched him. No one seals her again, Maeron said. The words entered the hall like law. The silver voice cord around Tessa's wrists snapped. Pain flashed through her hands, then vanished so suddenly she nearly fell. Maeron reached out, stopped before touching her, and lowered his hand. Choice. He was giving her space to stand. That unsettled her more than rescue. Orsien's face twisted. If her first note returns, every werewolf alive will hear it. She will command what no throne can restrain. Maeron looked at Tessa. The entire hall waited for fear to choose his face. It did not. Then perhaps the throne has been restrained by the wrong song. The wounded wolf shadow behind him bowed lower. Tessa lifted one trembling hand to her throat. The note touched her lips. No howl came. Instead, every war horn hanging along the victory hall cracked open from end to end. Outside Blackharp, keep beyond stone walls and snow wolves began answering. Not one pack. All of them. Orsien whispered first wolf song, and the floor beneath Tessa's feet lit with an ancient mark the war choir had hidden under black marble for generations. Snow slid from the high windows as the answering howls reached Blackharp Keep. They came from beyond the walls first, then from the kennels, then from the lower barracks, the north towers, the frozen training yards, and the old wolf crypts beneath the victory hall. Not dead voices, not ghosts. Living werewolves, royal hounds, border beasts, and battle shadows all answering one note Tessa Lorn had not yet released. She stood barefoot on the glowing mark beneath the black marble, one hand pressed to her throat, while every cracked war horn along the walls trembled like it feared what it had awakened. The mark under her feet was not a crown. It was a circle of open wolf mouths, all facing inward. At the center lay one carved line. First note holds command. High Choirmaster Orsien Vale stared at it, as if the floor had betrayed him. Lady Saratha Morn clutched the broken gold chain at her throat. The stolen note hovered between her and Tessa, flickering silver blue, unable to decide whether to return home or collapse. The royal singers remained on their knees, voiceless and shaking. Maeron Blackharp looked from the mark to Orsien. You built my victory hall over this. Orsien's face tightened. Your ancestors did, and you hid it. I protected the throne. The living war choir answered through the carved wolves. Protected the theft. The words made Sarathi flinch. Tessa tried to step back from the mark. The floor held her. Not cruelly, not like a chain, like a hand beneath the foot of someone about to fall. Maeron saw the fear cross her face. He moved closer, then stopped before entering the glowing circle. Tessa. Her name in his mouth made the stolen note tremble. She swallowed hard. I do not know what it wants. Orsian laughed, once thin and ugly. It wants what it was born to do. Command. That is why her throat was sealed. That is why the note was placed where court training could control it. Sarithi's eyes flashed. You said it would fade from her. I said she would never use it. Tessa turned toward her. The hurt was quieter than anger. You wore it while I was called hollow. Sarathi's lips parted. No answer came. The war choir opened another memory. This time it showed no child's bench, no needle, no stolen chain. It showed the northern campaign only weeks before Maeron standing in blood-dark snow as his werewolf tried to rally the packs. His command rang out strong and royal, but the wolves did not move. Then Sarathi sang from a ridge behind him. Tessa's stolen note passed through the gold chain, and every werewolf charged. The court saw the truth. The victory had not answered Sarathi. It had answered Tessa's sealed first note. Maeron's face went still. For one breath, Tessa thought he would look at her with hunger for power. The same hunger. Orsian feared the same hunger that had stolen her before she knew the shape of herself. Instead, his silver eyes darkened with shame. My armies marched by your wound. Tessa shook her head because she did not want pity in front of the whole hall. Pity was another way of making pain useful. Orsian seized the moment. Majesty, if you let that note return, she will outrank every war command in the kingdom. Every wolf alive will answer her throat before your crown. Maeron's wolf shadow lifted its head. The hall waited. Tessa waited too, though she hated herself for it. Maeron stepped to the edge of the glowing mark. Then the crown will learn to ask before it commands. The stolen note flared. Sarathi staggered as the broken chain pulled away from her throat, link by link. She cried out not from pain alone, but from the terror of being left with only her own voice. The note drifted toward Tessa. Orsian raised his baton with both hands and slammed it into the floor. The ivory split. A black seal burned beneath it. The glowing wolf mouth circle turned red. Tessa's throat closed. Not from fear. From the old spell waking again. Orsian's voice shook with rage. If the first note will not stay stolen, it will be buried with the vessel. The war choir's mouth snapped shut. Maeron lunged forward, but the red seal threw him back before he crossed the circle. His wolf shadow slammed into the same barrier and let out a furious, soundless snarl. Tessa dropped to her knees, both hands at her throat. The stolen note hovered just out of reach. Sarathi stared at Orsian in horror. You told me the seal could not kill her. Orsian did not look at her. That was before she woke the whole kingdom. The floor beneath Tessa opened into darkness, and from below the victory hall every chained werewolf began to howl her name. The black marble did not swallow Tessa Lorn. It lowered her. The victory hall rose away in a ring of red light, carrying the shattered feast, the voiceless royal singer's Sarathi's broken chain, and Maeron Blackharp's furious silver eyes, upward until all of them became shadows above her. Cold air rushed around Tessa's bare feet. Her throat burned so tightly she could not even whisper. The stolen note hovered above the opening just out of reach. Then the darkness below answered. Not with one howl, with hundreds. Tessa landed on wet stone beneath the hall knees, striking hard. The chamber around her was vast and low-carved directly into the mountain under Blackharp Keep. Iron arches crossed the ceiling like ribs. Moonwater ran through narrow channels along the floor, and behind black bars in cages cut from old war metal stood the kingdom's living werewolves. They were not dead. They were worse than dead, alive, muzzled, and listening. Each wolf wore a collar of silver-black iron around its throat. Each collar held one tiny gold link, shaped like the broken pieces of Sarathy's voice chain. When the wolves saw Tessa, the links glowed silver blue. Her stolen note had not been kept in one chain. It had been divided among the army. A voice came from above, carried through the red-lit opening. "Do you understand now?" Orsian called down. That sound was never yours to keep. It was too large for one kitchen girl. Tessa pushed herself upright. A white werewolf nearest the bars lowered its massive head. Its muzzle was scarred where the collar had rubbed raw. She touched her own throat. The wolf's collar tightened. It whimpered. Tessa's hand fell away at once. Above Maeron struck the red seal again. The blow shook dust from the ceiling, but the barrier held. His wolf shadow slammed beside him, soundless with rage. "Release the seal," Maeron said. Orsian's answer came calm and cold. "If I do, she calls the werewolves before the crown does. They are not yours." "No," Orsian said. "They are the kingdom's. That is why her throat had to be broken into useful pieces." The words moved through Tessa slowly. Broken into useful pieces. She looked from cage to cage. Every wolf stared at her with bright, suffering eyes, not asking her to command them. Not yet. Asking whether she was the pain in their collars or the end of it. Sarathy's voice trembled from above. "I did not know it was split." Tessa almost laughed, but no sound could pass the seal in her throat. Did not know. The old excuse of beautiful people who accepted miracles without asking what was buried beneath them. The living war choir above tried to open again. Tessa felt the stone mouths straining through the floor, but Orsian's red seal had forced them shut. The hall could not speak. The wolves could not howl. Her throat could not release. Silence had become a prison large enough for a kingdom. Then one wolf moved. Not the white one. A black werewolf at the far end of the chamber stepped forward until Moonwater touched its paws. It was enormous, older than the others, with scars carved across its muzzle and one silver ear torn like Maeron's wolf shadow. Its collar held no gold link. It held a whole ring. Tessa felt the glow beneath her throat, answer it so sharply she staggered. This was not just a werewolf. This was the living body of the king's command line. The beast all other battle wolves heard beneath Maeron's orders. And its collar was built from the first theft. The oldest wolf bowed, not to the crown above, to Tessa. The red seal around her throat cracked. A breath slipped through. Small, almost nothing. But every collar in the chamber loosened by one link. Above, Orsian shouted, "Do not let her make a sound." The cages opened. Not fully, only enough for the wolves to step one paw beyond the bars. Maeron appeared at the edge of the pit above blood, running from his hand where he had struck the barrier, until his knuckles split. "Tessa," he said, and this time her name did not sound like a question. It sounded like a promise waiting for permission. She looked up at him through the red light. Then she looked at the old black wolf. Tessa understood the choice Orsian had built for her. If she stayed silent, the collars would remain. If she called the note back too quickly, every werewolf alive might answer her before she knew how to spare them. Her voice had been stolen, but command was not the same as freedom. Tessa knelt before the old wolf and placed both hands flat on the Moonwater stone. Not a howl. Not yet. A hum rose in her sealed throat, too low for nobles, too old for chains. The first collar broke, and far above her in the victory hall, Lady Sarathy screamed as every stolen link around her throat turned to ash. Ash fell from Lady Sarathy's throat like black snow. The gold voice chain that had made her beloved, feared, and obeyed broke link by link across the victory hall. Each piece burned away before it touched the marble. Sarathy clutched her neck with both hands, but no blood came. Only silence. Her own. For the first time the court heard what remained when Tessa Lorn's stolen note was gone. A thin, shaking breath. Nothing more. High Choirmaster Orsian Vale turned on her with open fury. "Hold the Queen's answer." Sarathi stared at him. "I cannot." The words came out small. The royal nobles recoiled from her, as if beauty had become a mask dropped at their feet. The voiceless singers still knelt in their broken crescent gold masks, split across the mouth. Above them, the carved wolves of the living war choir strained against the red seal stone throats locked shut. At the edge of the pit, Alpha King Maeron Blackharp looked down into the darkness beneath the hall. Tessa was below him, kneeling among the caged war wolves, palms pressed to moonwater stone. She was not howling, not commanding, only humming so low the marble trembled before ears could catch it. But the wolves heard. One by one, collars cracked. Not all the way, just enough to let pain breathe. Maeron's wounded wolf shadow pressed beside him, ears forward, silver eyes fixed on the girl below. It did not fight the hum. It followed it. Orsian saw that and went pale with rage. "Majesty, if you let her continue, the command line will leave your blood." Maeron did not turn. "No, it will leave your leash." Orsian lifted the broken ivory baton. A red thread of old choir law ran from its split center into the pit below. The collars tightened again. A white wolf screamed. Tessa's hum faltered. Maeron reached for the red thread, but it burned his palm before he touched it. The old law rejected the crown. The seal had not been made to obey kings. It had been made to protect the theft from them. Orsian raised his voice for the hall. "Do you see? Even the law denies him. The girl's throat is not a gift. It is a weapon that will make every war wolf answer a scullery servant before the Alpha King." Tessa heard him below. The words found old wounds easily. Scullery servant, hollow throat, girl-shaped absence. Her hum thinned. The old black wolf before her lifted its scarred muzzle and stepped closer. The whole ring of stolen links around its collar glowed silver blue. Tessa saw small memories inside them herself. As a child, asleep beside the kitchen hearth, a hand pressing a cloth over her mouth, Orsian whispering that a first note must never wake in a low-born throat. Then another memory opened. Maeron, younger, standing in the victory hall after his father's death. Orsian placing one hand over the war choir floor and saying, "The crown must borrow what the bloodline lacks." The stolen note had not only been used by Sarathi, it had been fed into the throne. Tessa lifted her face toward the pit opening. "Maeron," she whispered. The sound was barely voice, yet every wolf looked up. Maeron went still. "I hear you." Orsian moved fast. He drove the broken baton into the red seal. The living war choir screamed, without sound. The pit walls split. Every collar flared, forcing the wolves to bare their teeth toward Tessa. Their bodies lowered, not in respect now, but under command. "Kill the vessel." The order did not need words. Maeron jumped. The court shouted as the Alpha King dropped from the victory hall into the wolf chamber below. He landed hard between Tessa and the first lunging wolf, black armor striking moonwater stone. His wolf shadow fell with him, wounded but massive, placing itself before her hum. The old black wolf froze inches from his throat. So did every other war wolf. Not because Maeron commanded them, because Tessa's shaking hand had closed around the broken collar link at her throat, and the hum had changed. It was no longer asking the wolves to obey. It was asking them to remember themselves. The red seal cracked from the pit to the throne above. Orsian stumbled back. Sarathi looked down through the broken floor, tears bright on her face. "What is she doing?" The living war choir answered at last, one stone mouth forcing itself open through the seal, returning the first note to the one it was stolen from. Tessa's throat glowed white. The old black wolf lowered its head, and Maeron, still standing between her and the army his crown had leashed, dropped his sword into the moonwater. "Then take it back," he said. Moonwater rippled around Maeron Blackharp's fallen sword. The blade sank halfway into the shallow stream beneath the victory hall, its black steel catching the white glow from Tessa Lorn's throat. Above them, the broken floor framed the feast court like a ring of frightened faces. Below, hundreds of werewolves stood half free from their cages, collars cracked but not broken, bodies trembling between old command and remembered pain. Tessa did not reach for the stolen note. Not yet. It hovered before her mouth, silver blue and shaking, no longer trapped in Serethi's chain, no longer divided cleanly among collars, but still afraid of becoming sound. That was the part no one in the hall understood. A stolen thing did not come home whole. Maeron stood between her and the wolves with empty hands. His werewolf shadow pressed beside him, torn ear lifted, its muzzle lowered, not in command but restraint. He could have ordered the beasts. He could have taken his sword back. He could have made the moment about crown and control. He did none of those things. High above Orshan Vale dragged himself toward the red seal carved into the marble edge. Blood marked his fingers where the broken baton had cut him. "She cannot hold it," he shouted. The first note was never meant for mercy. It was made to command war. Tessa looked at the old black wolf before her. Its collar still held the whole ring of stolen links. Through them she felt every battlefield where her note had been used, wolves charging through snow, soldiers shouting victory, kings raising banners over bodies, Serethi singing, while Tessa scrubbed blood from the lower stairs. The victory had worn her silence like a crown. Her throat tightened. Maeron heard the change in her breath. Tessa. She shook her head once. Not at him. At the fear inside herself. "If I take it back wrong," she whispered, "they will obey me." The old black wolf's ears lowered. Not from fear, from understanding. Maeron looked at the wolves, then at her. Then, "Do not take command. Take witness." The word entered her like a hand at her back. Witness. Not weapon. Not queen. Not answer to every war. Tessa lifted her fingers to the silver blue note. It touched her skin and shivered through her bones. Pain opened in her throat, old and bright. She saw herself as a child, with cloth over her mouth, saw Orsian's needle, saw Serethi's chain clasped shut, saw Maeron's armies moving to a song stolen before it had ever been allowed to choose. Then she saw something new. The first wolf song had not been born to command armies. It had been born to call wolves home from war before kings spent them past honor. A sound rose from her chest. Small, not a howl. A single, low note, trembling, but alive. The collars answered. One by one, the gold links inside them cracked open. The wolves did not kneel. They did not charge. They stood taller, as if invisible hands had finally left their throats. Above, the living war choir tore its stone mouths open through Orsian's seal. Moonlight poured down in wide white streams. Orsian screamed, "Stop her!" Serethi stepped into his path. Her own voice was gone thin and rough, but she used it anyway. "No." He struck her. She fell against the marble, but the delay was enough. Tessa's note deepened. Every broken royal singer gasped as breath returned. Not their old stolen power, not the victory howl, only their own voices, raw and ordinary. Some wept. Some looked ashamed. Most looked afraid of the girl below, who had given back what had never belonged to them. The old black wolf lowered its massive head until its brow touched Tessa's shoulder. The whole ring around its throat split. Silver blue light rushed from the collar into Tessa's chest. She staggered. Maeron caught her elbow, then released her the instant she found her balance. The note entered her throat fully. For the first time in her life, Tessa felt the shape of her howl. It was not loud. It was endless. The red seal above cracked from edge to edge. Orsian stared down, face emptied of triumph. Then the war choir revealed one final memory in the moonwater at Tessa's feet. Orsian kneeling years ago, before a hidden council of border lords promising that whoever controlled the no-howl girl's first note would control Maeron Blackharp's werewolves. And beside those lords stood Lady Serethi's father holding the first gold link. Maeron saw it. So did Serethi. From the dark upper gallery, an old noble voice spoke. Then the girl must not leave this pit alive. A black arrow fell from the upper gallery. Maeron Blackharp saw it before Tessa Lorn did. He moved without his sword, without command, without one heartbeat of hesitation. The arrow struck his shoulder instead of her throat, and cracked against his armor with a sound like ice breaking under a boot. Poisoned silver smoked where the tip touched him, eating a black mark into the metal. The hall above erupted. Tessa turned toward the gallery, one hand still pressed to her burning throat. An old nobleman stepped from the shadows beneath the carved rafters. He wore a white wolf fur cloak, fastened with tiny gold voice links, each one shaped like an open mouth. His silver hair was braided neatly down his back, and his long, pale face carried no panic at all. Behind him stood 6 border lords, with crossbows aimed into the pit. Lady Tessa Lorn went rigid. "Father," she whispered. Lord Maeron Morn did not look at Tessa as if she were a person. He looked at her the way men looked at property, returned damaged. "You were told," he said to Cerethi, "to keep the chain whole." Cerethi's hand flew to her bare throat. Her gold voice chain was gone, burned into ash. Without Tessa's stolen note inside it, her voice sounded thin, raw, almost ordinary. "You knew what it was," she said. Maeron's mouth curved. "I paid for what it was." The words sank through the pit. Tessa felt them settle in her bones beside every name they had given her hollow throat. No-howl girl, kitchen omen, silence made flesh. They had not simply stolen from her because they feared what she carried. They had priced it, divided it, sold it into victory. The old black werewolf beside her growled low, its broken collar still smoking around its throat. All around the lower chamber, the half-freed werewolves shifted bodies, forming a wall between Tessa and the gallery. Maeron's gaze lowered to them. "Careful. If she learns to use that sound, every beast in this kingdom will choose her throat over the crown." Maeron stepped forward, blood darkening the side of his armor. "You bought her voice. I bought the northern line. You chained my wolves with a child's wound. I gave you victory," Maeron said. "Your throne ate from it. Your banners rose from it. Your people sang over it. Do not pretend purity now because the vessel has learned to look wounded." Tessa flinched. Not because he was right, because part of the hall had once believed him. Every feast, every victory song, every noble voice raised above her silence had helped make the theft seem necessary. The living war choir opened a memory across the moonwater at her feet. A chamber beneath House Morn appeared narrow and candlelit. Orsian knelt before Maeron, younger, but already cold-eyed. Cerethi stood beside her father, as a girl, hands clasped tightly, face pale with fear and hope. On the table lay the first gold link, an ivory needle, and a strip of cloth stained with silver-blue light from Tessa's childhood throat. Maeron's voice in the memory was calm. "If the first note can command every werewolf alive, no throne should own it alone." Orsian answered, "Then divide it." Cerethi whispered, "Will the girl die?" Maeron did not even turn to her. If she lives silent, she serves. The memory vanished. Cerethi covered her mouth as if she might be sick. Tessa looked at her across the broken hall, and the wolf pit between them. Hatred should have been simple. Cerethi had worn the note accepted. The applause stood beside the throne with Tessa's stolen sound glowing at her throat. But the girl in the memory had looked afraid. Not innocent. Afraid. There was a difference, and Tessa hated that she was still soft enough to feel it. Maeron raised his hand. The border lords drew their bowstrings tighter. "Kill the vessel," he said. "The first note will scatter back into the collars. We will rebuild order before dawn." Maeron's voice dropped. "Loose one arrow, and House Morn ends tonight." Maeron's eyes sharpened. With what army majesty the wolves are listening to her. The trap closed around them. If Maeron commanded the wolves, he proved the stolen system still owned his reign. If Tessa commanded them, Maeron would name her a danger no king could permit. If neither moved, the arrows would fall. Tessa looked at the old black wolf. Its silver eyes did not ask her to order death. They asked whether freedom would become another command. She touched her throat. The first note trembled inside her, bright and endless, waiting for a shape. Rage offered one. Revenge offered another. Both would be easy. Both would make every man above understand fear. Tessa lowered herself into the moonwater. "No," she whispered. "Not to Maeron. To the part of herself that wanted to make pain obey her." She placed both hands on the old black wolf's broken collar. "I will not command you to kill for me." The wolf lowered its scarred brow to hers. Tessa let the note rise. Soft. Silver. Not war. Release. Every collar in the pit opened at once. The arrows flew. The wolves moved faster. They did not leap for throats. They did not tear through the court. They formed around Tessa like a living shield, taking bolts into fur, broken iron, and old scars. Maeron's wolf shadow hurled itself upward against the gallery rail, knocking 3 border lords back without sinking teeth into flesh. Maeron staggered fury, breaking his smooth face at last. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "You could have owned the army." Tessa looked up at him through the ring of wolves. "I wanted them free." For one breath, even the war choir seemed to hold still. Then Orsien crawled to the edge of the shattered red seal, both hands wrapped around the broken ivory baton. Blood ran from his fingers into the old mark. "If she will not command them," he rasped, "then I will command what remains of her silence." Sarathy saw him move. Orsien no. She lunged, but Maeron caught her by the wrist and dragged her back. "You have failed enough," he said. Orsien drove the baton into the final red mark. The pit went soundless. Not quiet. Soundless. Every werewolf froze mid-breath. The living war choir's stone mouths slammed shut. Tessa's throat closed around the first note, as if an iron hand had seized it from within. Maeron staggered. His wolf shadow vanished from beside him. No howl. No growl. No silver eye in the dark. For the first time since Tessa had seen him, the Alpha King stood utterly alone inside his own silence, and he could not hear his wolf. The moonwater stopped rippling. It froze around Tessa Lorn's bare feet in a thin silver sheet, trapping the reflection of the wolves above it, as if the whole chamber had been pressed under glass. The war-wolves remained in their living wall around her teeth-bared bodies locked mid-breath. Arrows hung in their fur. Broken collars gaped at their throats. Their eyes were awake. Their hearing was gone. Tessa pressed both hands to her throat. The first note was still there, but distant now, buried under the final silence Orsien had driven into the pit. It beat once beneath her skin, then sank away, as if the old seal were wrapping it in cloth after cloth, layer after layer, until even pain could barely find it. Above the victory hall moved without sound. Nobles shouted in silence. Royal singers clutched ruined throats. The carved wolf mouths of the living war choir strained open and failed, their stone jaws locked by red light. Then Tessa saw Maeron Blackharp. He stood a few steps away, one hand lifted into empty air where his wolf shadow had been. No beast answered. No silver eyes opened behind him. No war instinct moved through the dark to meet his hand. For the first time, the Alpha King looked less like a king than a man reaching for a part of himself that had been taken while he was still breathing. His mouth shaped a word. Nothing came. Tessa did not need to hear it. Wolf. The silence had cut deeper than command. It had severed the hidden path between Maeron and the creature that carried his oldest courage. Without it, his armor looked heavier. His blood looked darker. The wound in his shoulder spread black from the poisoned arrow, but he ignored it. His gaze stayed on the empty space beside him. A cruel thought rose in Tessa. Now you know. Now you know what it is to have the truest sound inside you stolen and used by someone else. The thought was sharp. It was honest. It was also not the shape she wanted her first howl to take. The old black wolf in front of her shifted one eye toward Maeron, then back to Tessa. Still frozen, still silent, still asking, not for revenge, for hearing. Above the pit, Orsien dragged himself upright beside the red seal. The broken ivory baton remained buried in the last mark, pulsing like a second throat. He could not speak, but the war choir carved his command into the red-lit air. The vessel cannot call what cannot hear. Lord Maeron Blackharp smiled from the gallery. He understood the silence, too. He had paid for it. He had planned for the moment when freedom might become too dangerous to control. He seized Saratha by the back of her white gown and pulled her to the pit's edge. Her hair had fallen loose from its victory pins. Her throat was bare red, where the chain had burned away. In her hand, she still clutched the thin gold knife she had taken from his belt. Maeron pressed his own blade beneath her jaw. The red light formed his words. Sing through her or watch her die. Sarathi's eyes met Tessa's across the pit. There was no borrowed glow left in them, no queen's answer, no shining court voice stolen from someone else's wound. Only a woman stripped down to the small, frightened sound she had hidden under beauty for years. Tessa hated her. Tessa pitied her. Both truths stood inside her together. Maeron moved toward Maeron. 3 border lords aimed crossbows at him. He stopped not from fear for himself, but because any step might loose arrows into the frozen wolves below. He looked at Tessa instead. No command, no plea, only the terrible trust of someone who knew the choice belonged to her. That trust hurt worse than doubt would have. The first note flickered under the seal. Tessa felt what Orsien wanted. If she tried to save Sarathi through the old chain, the note would pass through stolen law again. It would reopen the path they had used to divide her sound. Sarathi might live, but the war choir would learn that Tessa's mercy could be bent into a leash. If she refused, Sarathi would die for wearing what had been stolen, and Maeron would call that justice. Tessa stepped through the frozen moonwater toward the old black wolf. Her knees shook. Her throat ached. No sound followed her, but every wolf's eyes moved with her. She placed one hand on the wolf's broken collar and one over her own throat. Her lips formed the words the silence would not carry. I return hearing before command. The moonwater brightened. A crack split the red seal. Small. Orsien saw it, and slammed both palms onto the baton. Blood ran down the ivory. The silence deepened until Tessa's vision blurred. Maeron lifted his blade against Sarathi's throat. Sarathi closed her eyes, then opened them. For once, she did not wait to be chosen protected, sung through, or forgiven. She drove the gold knife not into her father's hand, but into the last hidden link embedded beneath her own burned chain scar. The link had been too small to see, but the war choir saw it. Tessa saw it. Sarathi screamed without sound as the final stolen piece tore free from her throat in a burst of silver-blue fire. Maeron staggered back his blade, falling from her neck. Orsien's red seal split from top to bottom. Sound returned in pieces. First, the splash of moonwater, then the growl of one freed wolf, then Maeron's sharp breath as his wolf shadow reappeared behind him, wounded, dim but alive. Tessa's throat opened. The first note rose. It was not loud yet. It was not war yet. It was the sound before howling, before command, before crown or choir or victory. The living war choir bowed its stone mouths toward her. And for the first time in her life, Tessa Lorn heard herself. The torches in the victory hall bent toward the pit, not from wind, from listening. Tessa Lorn stood in the moonwater with one hand at her throat and the other resting on the old black wolf's broken collar. Around her, hundreds of werewolves breathed again, their ears lifted, their eyes sharpened. The sound had returned to them in pieces, and each piece seemed to hurt before it healed. Above the living war choir opened every carved mouth in the walls. No song came yet. The hall was waiting for the girl who had never been allowed to make one. Tessa felt the first note rise through her chest. It did not feel like power. It felt like all the years She had swallowed herself, returning at once, kitchen smoke, winter stares, nobles laughing over her bowed head, Orsian's needle, Sarathy's chain, every feast where someone else had been praised for the sound, cut out of her. Rage came with it, a clean, terrible rage. The wolves felt it and shifted closer. Maeron Blackharp saw the movement. His wolf shadow had returned behind him, dim and wounded, but standing. It did not command the wolves back. It watched Tessa. So did he. "You can end them," Lord Maeron Morn said from the gallery, his voice finely restored and shaking. "That is what they fear. That is what we feared. Sing once and every werewolf will tear down anyone you name." Tessa looked up. Maeron had lost his smoothness. His white wolf fur cloak hung torn from one shoulder. Sarathy knelt near the pit edge with one hand pressed to the burned scar at her throat, the last hidden link gone. Orsian Vale crouched beside the split red seal, his broken baton still buried in the mark eyes, fixed on Tessa with hatred sharpened by terror. Maeron spread his hands. "Prove us wrong, hollow throat." The old name struck. But it did not enter her the way it once had. It hit the first note and broke. Tessa closed her eyes. If she howled with anger, the wolves would obey anger. If she howled for revenge, the hall would call her monster before the last echo faded. If she stayed silent, the callers would return in some new form, some new law, some prettier chain. She thought of Maeron dropping his sword. She thought of Sarathy cutting the final link from her own throat. She thought of the old black wolf, asking not to be aimed but freed. Tessa opened her eyes. "I will not spend my first howl on punishment." The war choir carried her words upward until every noble heard them. Orsian lurched to his feet. "Then you are still weak." "No," Maeron said. He stepped into the moonwater beside her sword, still lying where he had cast it down. His black armor was streaked with blood from the arrow in his shoulder, but he did not look at Maeron. He looked at the court. She is choosing what the throne forgot how to choose. Tessa's throat glowed silver blue. The first howl came. It was not a scream. It did not shake the walls by force. It opened through the chamber like moonlight, through a wound low at first, then deepening until every stone wolf mouth in the hall answered. The note passed through the werewolves, through the old collars, through the broken gold chain at Sarathy's feet, through the red seal under Orsian's baton. And everywhere it passed, theft separated from song. The collars fell from the wolves' necks in blackened pieces. Gold links turned to ash before they touched the floor. The royal singers gasped as their voices returned fully, not polished, not borrowed, not powerful enough to command armies but their own. Some began to weep. Others covered their faces. Sarathy sobbed once. Her voice, when it came, was thin and human. "I am sorry." Tessa heard her. She did not answer yet. Forgiveness was not another performance for the court. The first howl moved higher. The living war choir revealed its final memory across every wall, Orsian accepting Maeron's gold sealing Tessa's throat, dividing her note among callers, training Sarathy to wear what was stolen, then hiding the first wolf song beneath the victory hall so House Morn could control the war packs whenever the throne weakened. The court saw everything. Maeron tried to run. The freed wolves moved as one. They did not tear him apart. They circled him silent and enormous, forcing him backward until he fell to his knees beneath the carved wolf mouths. The old black wolf stood before him and bared its scarred teeth. Orsian ripped the baton from the red seal and raised it like a dagger. Maeron moved to stop him. Tessa's howl changed. Not louder, truer. The baton cracked in Orsian's hands. The ivory split open, spilling silver-blue dust stolen from her childhood note. It swirled once around his throat, then hardened into a collar of pale light. The war choir spoke through him. Thief of first sound. Orsian clawed at the collar, but no voice came from his mouth. The choirmaster who had fed on stolen throats stood silent before the hall he had deceived. Maeron's gold links heated around his cloak clasps. One by one they burned his noble seal away. Buyer of silence. The border lords dropped their crossbows. Maeron looked at them. Take them. His guards moved at once. No wolf had to be commanded. No fang had to prove the law. That was what made the moment feel final. Tessa let the howl soften. The werewolves lowered their heads not to her as soldiers to a master, but as living creatures hearing the end of an old pain. The old black wolf stepped close and pressed its brow against her shoulder. Its collar was gone. Its throat was free. Above the living war choir changed. The carved mouths closed one by one, then reopened without the red seal. Their moonlight no longer bent, only toward Tessa. It spread through the hall, touching wolves, singers, servants, soldiers, and even the broken dais. Maeron turned the court. His voice carried without the choir, lending it strength. Tonight, my throne learned its victories were carried by a stolen throat. My armies marched to a note taken from a child. My crown accepted songs it never questioned because they sounded useful. No one moved. He stepped back from Tessa, giving the whole hall a clear view of her standing alone in the moonwater. She is not Hollow Throat. She is not a scullery omen. She is Tessa Lorn, silent howl vessel keeper of the first wolf song of this kingdom. No command will pass through her voice unless she gives it freely. Tessa's eyes burned. The first note settled inside her at last. Not gone. Hers. Maeron lowered to one knee in the moonwater. The court gasped. His wolf shadow bowed beside him, wounded, but whole enough to choose. I will not ask your howl to serve my crown, Maeron said, looking up at her. But if you allow it, I will rebuild this kingdom, so no voice is ever called loyal because it was stolen. Tessa looked at him for a long moment. The girl who had once been in absence had an entire hall waiting for her answer. You begin, she said, voice quiet but unbroken by listening when no one is singing. Maeron bowed his head. Then I begin now. The war choir answered softly, not with a victory song, with a first song. The freed wolves lifted their muzzles, and this time when Tessa howled, she did not command them. She joined them. Above Blackharp Keep, the snow stopped falling. The kingdom heard a voice it had spent years trying to bury, and every royal voice lowered itself before hers.